In this video, I'm going to compare two North Face Ve25 tents. The one on my right is an older generation North Face Ve25. The one on my left is the current model. The big question is this model better than the old one, or do they not make things the way they used to anymore? The Ve25, according to the North Face, is our premier three-person tent, part of the Summit series designed for expeditions and tests by our team of athletes in extreme conditions. In this video, I will cover tent design, which will include poles and fabrics. I will look at interior features that make the tent possibly more livable or comfortable than a previous or newer version. I will look at ventilation options. And I will also cover any other features that maybe give one tent a particular advantage over the other. Excuse me. Tent design, just looking at the front of the tents. And there are a few subtle differences here. The newer version has a fully continuous pole sleeve, whereas this version here, there's a split in the pole sleeve, so a little bit easier to thread the pole on the new one. The zipper cover, good on this tent, but actually even better on this one. I mean, it's really deep. The deep zipper is really deep back in here, so it's really good zipper cover. On the newer version as well, you've got a window. On the older version, you haven't. Both have snow or stone balances at the front. The strap adjustment here is a buckle and strap, which gives really good adjustability, whereas on this one, you're stuck with your pegging points because you just have a strap with no actual buckle. So a few subtle differences at the rear of the tents. Zipper protection, again, better on the newer model than on the older one. The newer model also has snow or stone valances to secure the tent. And a new tent also has the buckle adjustment, which just makes it easier to peg the tent. So from the side of the new model tent, you can see a couple of differences. First of all, you have a ventilation opening here, which you don't have on the older model. And secondly, you definitely have a superior guy line system. The older model only has one guy line attachment point here. The newer model actually has an additional guy line attachment here and here. So you have the three attachments supporting the poles. This is an equalizing system, and it adjusts to sort of equalize the tension out on the guy line. The guy line here is also a Kevlar guy line, which is very strong. So the fabrics used on the new model, the fly sheet fabric here is a 40 denier combination of a silicone coating on one side and a PU on the other. The silicone adds to the strength of the fabric, and the PU coating means that on the inside you can actually add tape seams to make the tent completely waterproof. The pole here is a 9mm DAC pole, as are all the poles on this tent. The older version of the Ve25 also uses a 40 denier fly sheet fabric. This fabric, however, is coated on both sides with silicone as opposed to the silicone and PU combination. When the fabric is covered on both sides, it allows the silicone to really impregnate into the fabric, which gives it a very high tear strength. The disadvantage, however, is that the seams are actually not waterproof when it comes out of the factory, so you have to manually seam seal these. The pole here is an Easton pole. It's a 7075, I think T9, 8mm, as opposed to the DAC pole, which is a 9mm on the newer version. So if we look at some of the design differences on the inner tents from the outside, the older tent has pole sleeves, whereas the newer tent has a combination of pole sleeves and clips, which undoubtedly makes pitching easier, particularly in high winds. There is also a continuous pole sleeve on the newer tent, whereas you can see the poles and the brakes and pole sleeves on this one. Looking slightly into the tent here, it's an older roll and tie up system, whereas on the newer tent, you've got a pocket, to actually stuff the door into. And the way the ground sheet is cut here, the protection is a good bit higher. It's a much greater bathtub floor than what you would have on the older tent. So looking at the tents here just from the side, the cut on the ground sheet here is just level, and it's high, but it's not just as high as to what it would be on the newer tent. So the cut here is much higher at the ends and slightly lower at these points, and North Face would say that this leads to better tension on the inner tent, which increases the structural strength. Quick side view looking at the difference between the pull sleeves and clips. Pull sleeves here, and just to show you, the older model has one of the old foam spacers, which helps increase separation between the outer and inner tent, a feature which I always liked, and sadly it's been missed on this, although I do like the nice North Face decal on the inner of the tent here too. So now what I want to do is just talk about some of the features on the inside of this tent relating to, I suppose, comfort and livability. It's really exceptionally well featured. One of the best and most comfortable tents that I've actually ever been in. So you have 4 large pockets, 2 on either side at the front and the back, and these are actually off the ground. In addition to the side pockets, you have pockets in the roof, 1 front and back. You then have your ventilation in the roof as well, and a multitude of hanging loops either for gear or lines. So you have 1 here at the back, or 2 at the back, 2 at the front, 2 actually here on either side, again front and back, and additional ones sort of in the corners. So, you know, really well featured. The other thing about these tents is you can lie either lengthwise in them or across, but you know, the dimensions of the tents hasn't changed in any way, so one tent will have no real advantage over the other. So if I'm quickly now going to talk about the comfort and livability inside the older North Face Ve25. The pockets here are at floor level, so they're not nearly as deep as the ones that are up higher on the side walls of the tent on the newer version. The gear hanging loops, you only have 4, 1 in each corner. And as I said earlier on, you know, you have to actually roll the door down. There's no pocket for the door. So certainly they've thought a good bit more on the newer tent about adding sort of comfort and convenience features. This tent is not badly featured in any way. It's just that the new version has so many amazing features that you then sort of notice the difference. So my final thoughts, the newer model or the older one. To be fair to North Face, even though this is 2 generations back and the one after this is improved a bit more as well, this model has a number of, I suppose, small improvements that make a significant difference when you add them all up. So for example, guy lines, 3 points of attachment on this one and a better actual guy line than the older model. Zipper covers, pretty good on this one, even better on the newer model. A badge on the front and a window on this one, and the attachment points here are just straps, whereas on the new model you have a strap on a buckle, which just means it's easier to get your pegs in because you can put the peg at different locations and then tighten it. On this you're kind of stuck with the one sort of pegging point. Ventilation on the new tent, 2 ventilation options on either side. On the old tent, none. On the new tent we also have 9mm DIC poles. On the older tent we have 8mm Easton poles. Now whether DIC are better than Easton, I'm not going to get into that discussion, but certainly in my opinion 9mm are more rigid and stronger than 8, and that's where this tent has another advantage. You have a pull sleeve here that is split. You have a continuous pull sleeve on the front, which just makes it a little bit easier. The rear of the tent, you also have the zipper, better zipper covers and valances on the rear, whereas you don't have them on this tent. So certainly all of the features on this add up to make a difference. The only real advantage that the older tent would have is that it has a silicone fly sheet that's coated on both sides. This really increases the tear strength of the fly sheet, because the silicone allows it to sort of stretch and flex a little bit. The PU coating on this fly sheet actually makes the fly sheet more rigid, and the problem is then it actually will tear easier. Although, to be fair to North Face, at all of the critical points there's welded extra fabric in behind the guy line attachments here to make it stronger. And at the front of the tent here, you know, you have this strap that's attached just to 1 point, whereas on this tent here the straps actually have a point at the bottom and an additional point, you know, about a quarter of the way up the front of the tent there, and that has a strap at the back to sort of spread the stress and load. the interior of the tents. This one has, you know, superior pockets and superior attachment points for hanging gear. So that's it for today, I'm afraid. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Coming up soon, I'm going to have another video, and that other video is going to be of all of my tents, where I'll be looking at each of those tents in turn and discussing 3 or 4 features that I love and 3 or 4 features that I hate. So stay tuned for that one.